Okay, I'm Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. Today, I'm going to be reviewing the sequel to Riders of the Purple Sage by Zane Grey, and that is The Desert Crucible by Zane Grey. Maybe you saw my review of Riders of the Purple Sage, man. It was a Western that I loved. I absolutely loved it. This is the sequel. Here's the thing. These books were written a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I'm telling you, these things were written in the 1912, 1915, over 100 years ago. So this is some real literature. Riders of the Purple Sage, The Desert Crucible. Now, there's a little bit of history behind this book, The Desert Crucible. So Riders of the Purple Sage became a huge hit back when it was first published, and so the publisher wanted a sequel. Well, Zane Grey gave him a sequel called The Desert Crucible. The publisher, man, they butchered it. What they did was they took out a lot of the scenes, a lot of the brutal scenes, a lot of the controversial scenes, and they published it under this title, The Rainbow Trail. Much thinner version, a much edited version. And this is the way the sequel looked for 80 some odd years. The Rainbow Trail. And Zane Grey was always unhappy with it because the publisher and the editors took out all of the good parts of the story that he liked. Well, publishers changed, things changed, and finally we got the actual book that he wanted, which is The Desert Crucible, published with all of the stuff added back in that was edited out. What did they edit out? So if you followed my review of the Riders of the Purple Sage, you know it was about a gunslinger who drifted into a Mormon community looking for his lost sister who he thought had been kidnapped by Mormon polygamists to be made into a wife in their Mormon polygamist clan. Well, the sequel takes place in the same area in the Mormon polygamist territory in the old desert Southwest. And it was a lot more harsh on the Mormon church than the publisher was comfortable with. So they took out a lot of the implied incestual relations that these polygamist clans used to have, a lot of the child rape that these clans used to have, a lot of the stuff that all the people in the United States knew about Mormons to be true. The publisher was like, well, we don't know if people will be comfortable reading about that. So they edited a lot of it out of this Rainbow Trail. Well, it got put back in The Desert Crucible. Zane Grey's original manuscript is actually The Desert Crucible. So, just know the history. So we're not going to, well, we talk about the covers. Let's talk about the covers. I actually think the cover for the Rainbow Trail is actually a little more interesting than the cover for the Desert Crucible. You know, this one still has the little price sticker on it, which I didn't want to tear off because, you know, sometimes the price stickers leave it all gummy and gooey, and I hate that. So I just left it on. But I actually kind of like this. I actually like the Rainbow Trail cover a little bit more than the Desert Crucible, even though the Rainbow Trail is not the official version that Zane Grey wanted, so we'll get rid of it. Talk about this one. This one is the sequel to Riders of the Purple Sage. You can go watch my review of that. I will link to it here and there. Or you can just type in my name, Brian Lee Durfee, Riders of the Purple Sage, and by God, the video will appear on your screen. It's magic. You don't even need to follow the links. You can do it yourself. The internet is a do-it-yourself thing. I know you need help with links to everything. Otherwise, you just won't click. You just won't search. But get off your asses and search a few things here now. Okay, anyway. Enough with the rant. Desert Crucible. So, Riders of the Purple Sage was set in a fictitious town in southern Utah where you can go watch that video, figure out that this is the sequel to it, where the characters of Riders of the Purple Sage have kind of become legend. And there's this guy named Shefford who who two of the characters from Riders of the Purple Sage escaped the Mormon territory, and they went back east. Venters and the little girl and the girl he found and the girl he nursed to health in the cave. This all happened in Riders of the Purple Sage. Venters, the cowboy Venters, and the girl he nursed to health in the cave. They escape Mormon territory. They go back east. They meet this guy named Shepherd, and they tell him the legend of Lassiter the gunslinger and Jane, the Mormon girl that he saved, and the little baby Faye that they also saved from the polygamous clans. And so Shepherd gets it in his mind that these people are still in danger because they're still out there. So he, especially the little baby Faye, who would have grown up by now and been his age, and so now he's kind of fixated. He's like kind of fixated on, I want to save this young girl from the Mormon clans, from the Mormon polygamous clans, and he's got it in his head. Never met her. He just heard stories of her, that she's probably grown up and been kidnapped by Mormons, and so he's like, I want to be like Lassiter. I want to go out and save this girl from the Mormon clans. And so he goes out. When I say this is a sequel to Riders of the Purple Sage, the characters of Riders of the Purple Sage don't really show up until the end, because it's mostly a quest of Shepherd, the cowboy, going back to Utah to find this girl Faye, who's probably now in her teens, and he's kind of got a little thing for her. He wants to save her. He wants to rescue her, right? He goes back to search for the gunslinger Lassiter, Jane, and the girl Faye, and that's the whole point of the novel. I mean, that's the sequel to it. I mean, it's not like a sequel where we get to follow the characters from Riders of the Purple Sage. The characters from Riders of the Purple Sage are more of like a myth, more of like this myth that this guy is on a quest to find. And he ends up in southern Utah. And there's a couple things about this book that I liked more than Riders of the Purple Sage. There's a couple things that I liked less. The one thing I liked more about this was Zane Grey. If you followed my review of Riders of the Purple Sage, you know it was set in a fictitious Utah town where I didn't really know whereabouts in Utah it was. So I pictured it being down by St. George, Utah, or Hurricane, Utah. No, he kind of pinpoints the location in this book, which is in the more of the Blanding Bluff area, the Rainbow Bridge area. That's why the original novel was called The Rainbow Trail, because a lot of the action takes place on the Rainbow Trail that goes up to the big Rainbow Bridge, which is in Utah, which has since been covered by Lake Powell. Back in the day, Lake Powell didn't belong there. It wasn't a reservoir. There was a lot more, anyway. You can do your research on Lake Powell and Rainbow Bridge if you'd like. I'm just saying, he points out exactly where we're at here in the book finally, so I kind of got an idea of the geography we're dealing with. Shepherd goes back. It's a long quest. There's a lot more about Mormons in this. Like I said, they edited out all the Mormon stuff for the Rainbow Trail when it was re-released as the Desert Crucible with all of Zane Grey's original manuscript put back in. There's a lot more stuff about Mormons in this, and it ain't pretty. And he paints a way more wicked version of Mormonism than even was in the Riders of the Purple Sage. And I delighted in reading it. I mean, I love reading. I love Mormon history. I grew up in southern Utah amongst the whole thing, and so I get it. I understand it. I used to be Mormon. I can handle the stuff. And it's great. It's greatly weird. It's very well researched. Just like my review of Riders of the Purple Sage. You saw how I talked about that. This is the same way. Very well researched. Shepherd, he ends up going through a lot of adventures. There's another thing I liked about this more than Riders of the Purple Sage is with this one we get a lot more Native American characters. In Riders of the Purple Sage, we basically got none. In this one, we get a lot of Native American characters that help Shepherd search for the gunslinger Lassiter and Jane and Faye, and because they know that they're living in this hidden canyon. There's a lot of hidden canyons in southern Utah if you've ever been there, and so yeah, eventually he finds them, but it's not towards the end of not towards the last 40 or 50 pages where he finally locates. A little spoiler warning, but the adventure of him getting there is more of the point of the story. because, you know, he does end up finding them, and then we do get to interact with our original characters from Riders of the Purple Sage, and then it does fully feel like a sequel at that point. And I think it's a pretty darn good sequel, you know, and I think it was a shame that the original editors and publisher, you know, I'll pick the book up again because I tossed it. In this book, Rainbow Trail, the original version, Rainbow Trail, they butchered it by taking out a lot of the stuff. You know, I don't know why. You know, that was 100 years ago. We don't know why. We don't know why it happened, other than what they said, that they thought it was too dark, and they thought the Mormon parts were too dark and disturbing, with the incest, the Mormon polygamist incest, and the Mormon polygamist marriage of young wives underage. They thought it was too hard for people to handle, but it's not. It's real. It was real life back then. It's, you know, God, it's still happening today. Anyway, I really enjoyed the sequel to Riders of the Purple Sage. Only the second Zane Grey Western I have read. And I'm buying more as we speak. So at a lot of my book hauls in the future, you're going to see some Zane Grey novels pop up in those book hauls. So look forward to those. I think Zane Grey is a great new Western writer that I've just found and I'm excited about. And I'm going to start reading all this stuff. So I give the Desert Crucible a good 9.0 out of 10. It's a good, solid Western.